All right. Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. BEDC is pleased to put on this webinar for you called From Basic to Branded. And my name is Jamila Lodge. I'm the Communication and Development Director for BEDC, and today I'll be your moderator. I have with me 5 illustrious panelists, and I will introduce them to you, and then we'll get into moderated discussion. We will reserve some time at the end for questions and answers, so if you see, you should have a chat feature. So if you enter your questions there, my colleague Kelsey will assist us with answering the questions towards the end. But for the purpose of this webinar, we wanted to focus a little bit on branding and how to do it effectively. So we're going to be going over 3 main topics. Firstly, what is a brand? Is it your logo? Positioning the brand, building a brand identity, and leveraging a brand to build profitable partnerships. And who doesn't want to make money, right? So before we get into the question and answers, I'd like to first introduce each of the panelists. And we have with us Ken Dickinson. He is the co-owner of Burmemes, where he is actively involved in business and brand development and content creation. He's also a radio personality, an e-channel specialist at Clarion Bank, and a digital media consultant. And we also know Ken because we hire him frequently to kind of MC our events, and he was a fabulous MC for our Small Business Awards last year. So welcome, Ken.
Thanks, evening everyone.
Next up, we have Elizabeth Blakendahl, who is a former corporate attorney and successful entrepreneur who has grown a first-class event planning and design brand known as Etofol. I hope I'm saying that right. I practice. I practiced so long, and I was like, I know I'm gonna mess it up. But anyway, it's fabulous, and she's undeniable. She has an undeniable drive towards innovation, and premium offerings has allowed the brand to work with international brands such as Food Network, Associated Luxury Hotels International, and Veuve Clicquot, amongst many others. You can tell that English is my first language. Anyway, she's fabulous. If any of you have had an opportunity to attend any of her events, you would definitely agree with me. Next, we have D'Amico Watson, who is a graphic designer that specializes in motion design, creating film and broadcast work for Disney, Marvel, TNT, and Netflix. Partnering with Bermudian companies Strategy and Burnhouse Productions, he's also worked on campaigns for Goslings, Digicel, and BF&M, and he is also marketing director for the upcoming 2021 Carifta Games. So welcome, D'Amico.
Good evening, everyone.
We also have Avery Graham, and she's a Bermuda-based graphic designer. Her focus lies in branding, content creation, and art direction. She's a full-time lead designer for local female-led creative agency Strategy, and in her spare time, she freelances for clients across the globe. Since graduating from Ontario College of Art and Design University in 2015, Avery has conceptualized and executed creative for a variety of brands, as well as having built brand identities for businesses spanning a wide range of industries. Her love for her island home is evident in her design style, capturing a sense of celebration and tropical flair through her use of texture, shapes, and pops of color. Welcome, Avery. And last but certainly not least, we have Shannon Can, who is a lawyer and entrepreneur. How are you doing that, lady? In 2017, Shannon launched her first entrepreneurial venture, Assay Naturals, a vegan skincare and wellness brand with products made from naturally derived ingredients. Assay Naturals is sold worldwide, has featured in publications including the Vogue magazine, Marie Claire magazine, and Black Enterprise, and has won a Best in Bermuda award. So welcome to our panelists. Hopefully we're going to have a great and lively discussion. So, branding. What exactly is a brand when we say that, right? And the first question that always comes to mind for me is it the logo? So I'll start with you, Ken, since I see you first.
All right, I'll break the ice. Is a logo the definition of a brand?
Yes.
I think it's an extension of the brand. I think a brand is like a personality. You know, everyone has a personality, And then you have different elements that sort of tie into that personality. So logo is important. It's something that's recognizable. It's something that you should really think a lot about, but it's definitely not in a silo as, you know, this is the brand.
Okay, so if let me go to you, Avery. When you think of helping someone to put together their logo and build their logo, is it necessary to incorporate some of the personality that Kian mentioned in his response in order to give this logo that is going to be able to defy or enter into the market and create a lasting brand?
I do think personality, well, I like to look at branding in three parts.
Okay.
You have your brand, which is the emotional, how people perceive you emotionally. And then you have your identity, which is all the central aspects of the brand. So the, you know, packaging, the marketing, the collateral, the stationery, the products, that sort of thing. And then comes the logo, which is the mark that sort of defines the brand. It represents the brand. So when they see that mark, they know it's you as a whole. It's what, you know, your brand personifies, basically. When it comes to logo design, I think I like to tell my clients first, you know, come up with a strategy. Have you really worked out, you know, who your target audience is, what it means to do what you do, what you're passionate about, your values, your mission, your vision. I like to get into that before we start the logo design, but I do think the logo design as a whole is, you know, an essence of the whole entire brand package, basically. It's the one visual mark that people can recognize. Yeah.
Okay, so I know that a lot of people, especially when you're branding on a budget, right? So you're starting your business, you're a new entrepreneur, and you want to get out there and you want to create this mark. But in the instance where you can't hire a firm like Strategy, and a lot of people go to like the logo makers on the website and things like that. But some of the things that you said, I think, are really important, like understanding what your mission and your values are before you go down that road. So what is your advice to people who may be on a budget and are trying to create brands for themselves and things like that? What is your advice to them, and what are some of the tools that they can use to try and do some of the things that maybe an agency would do for them for a fee, but if they just can't afford it, how can they go down that road to building their brand or building their logo?
I think it's well, easy enough to kind of do your own research. So whether it be surveys, figuring out who your competitors are, listening in on social media, you know, there's certain groups like Magiclist, you know, who are people going to in Bermuda these days, or you know, things like that if you're talking about a local market. So do your own research first, discover who your target audience is, who your competitors are. You know, that's something you can do on your own. You don't need to hire an agency to do, well, you could, but it's easy enough to do on your own. And then I would say, start focusing on what you want your brand to represent. Who is it as a person? You know, are you someone, is your brand someone who's going to be, you know, very lighthearted and funny, or is your product more serious and yeah, serious and more professional? So kind of pick your focus and personality that way. And then I would say, you know, start by choosing a business name. That's something an agency doesn't need to do for you. You can do that, and I think from then on, you can start to develop your slogan. And then I like to say, because I'm the designer, not necessarily a business owner, but my primary focus is design. You can come to us for a look and feel, a design aesthetic, an identity. I recommend you come to a professional rather than go on those, you know, $5 logos, because
no logo ups, none of that.
Yeah, you don't want your brand to, you want people to really dig in deep and understand what you're, you know, you're trying to convey with your brand, and what it means to you and that sort of thing. So yeah, before you come to us with any, I think sort that, do your research, come up with that slogan, your vision, your mission, and then come to us when you're ready to branch out and do the visual aspects of your
visual. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Jamila,
I
can
want
I
to get
add
the
15
entrepreneurs
seconds to
in
that?
on this. Oh, go ahead, Kian.
I just, sometimes we think, every business that's huge, like you think of garage, like Amazon, that famous picture of, the little word saying Amazon
Yeah.
is sitting in some garage, or Apple, or these things. When it comes to budget and you're thinking about your brand, think big, because what you start out with is often what people remember, if it gets huge. So don't think because you only have $100 or something like that, that's all you're going to invest. You have to think big and do it right from the beginning. Don't think because you're small, you're always going to be small.
That's a great tip, and that's a good segue into me getting the entrepreneurs involved. So, ladies, Liz, I'll start with you. When you were developing your brand for your business and all of that, did you go down that road? Because yours is very crisp and very clean. So did you give some thought as to the personality of the brand, or do you think it was more a reflection of your personality that you wanted to incorporate in your brand? Like, what was your process?
Yeah, so for me, the brand very much grew organically. Like, I never set out to create this business. I literally didn't have a business name for the first few months, I think, definitely a few months, because I was just like, just doing this for fun. And then when people started to ask me like for a website and all those things, I'm like, okay, what am I going to name this business? And I really struggled at first because I wanted something that resonated. And then, as Kian said, I just wanted something that would be long lasting. Even if the brand didn't grow, I just wanted to be professional. Like, I think that's like a part of my personality. So I just wanted it to be clean from the beginning. And then, yeah, funny enough, I just started on like a free logo web app or something, just to think about, okay, like what like ideas do I want? And then from there, I developed like the very crisp, clean look that we have now. So yeah, I think for me, it was always just thinking of like what I wanted the brand to kind of embody going forward. So I always knew I wanted it to be in the luxury market, and those sorts of things. So I think it started from the outset. I didn't really verge off from that like at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you have very quickly had relationships with larger brands and all of that. And I do think that yours fits right in with the rest of them, right? And so conscious or unconscious, you did a great job using the free software to come up with something that I think is lasting. So Avery, I'd like to ask you, not Avery, sorry, Shannon. I wanted to ask you for your brand. And that you've worked with Vogue and Marie Claire magazine. Did you kind of think about think big, as Kian said, and what you wanted it to be and who you wanted to be working with when you were developing your look and feel for your business?
Yes, absolutely. From the start, I knew I wanted to compete with big international brands. So when it came to the design, when it came to the look and feel of, I guess, the packaging and also the logo, I knew I wanted to have something that could compete. In terms of the brand strategy, similar to what Avery mentioned, I did go along the path of trying to figure out who my target audience is, what they look like, where they usually shop, what their financial status would be, which would be applicable for a brand where you're trying to price at a certain point. And then when it came to coming up with the logo, which was the last step, I actually did work with Avery, and she designed the logo for O'Shea Naturals. And so that was like the last step. I had the name already. I already sort of had sort of a color scheme that I wanted. I sort of knew what I wanted, and then I went to an agency after.
Okay.
So what you was mentioning earlier about having a budget, is so much you can do for free. So you could still launch as, with a feel of a big brand. And also if you want a budget and you want to start small and you don't want to invest in certain things, you can always change layer. For instance, It's like Nike's logo now wasn't the logo it had originally, so you can always change in the future.
That's a good point, and that brings me sort of to rebranding. So, D'Amico, let me get your expertise, because you've worked with these huge, like Disney, like everybody knows Disney, right? And so I would imagine that working with companies that have a brand that is cemented, you know what I mean, in the public's mind, that there can be a bit of a fine line with regard to what you can and can't do, because they've built this kind of brand history for years. So I'm wondering, for you working with them, what are some of the things that you may have learned as it relates to kind of helping to develop new brands or new products and services?
I think the primary thing that I think any brand should look at, whether big or small, and you see bigger brands getting to do it because they're already established, is be creative and play around. I think starting from what you guys were discussing at first, the logo. The logo, everyone thinks, okay, I've got my logo done. What can I do with it next? Whether it's through social media, whether it's through television broadcast, no matter how big or small your budget is, don't be afraid to get creative with your brand. And that's what you see when you see Walt Disney, Nike. I mean, Nike started off as basically, a track running shoe company, and their logo was basically made to fit a shoe. That's what the initial goal was. There was no big brand, I'm going to use Nike and have Serena suddenly, being the focus of my campaigns. Nike's initial thing was just, let's put it on a shoe. And from there, they've kind of blown that up, and it's, it's extended around where it's gone from Oregon all the way international. And, that's how you have to think as a small brand. You can't just say, oh, my brand's going to stay small forever. You create that initial logo, no matter how simple, how sophisticated it is. And then, play around with it. Just have fun, put it on shirts, use it in all of your marketing, your promotion. I think that's what a lot of people are scared to do, especially when you come to somewhere in Bermuda. Everyone thinks, my company now that's the end all be all, but you don't know where your company's going to end up tomorrow.
That's very true.
So, just have fun. And that's, I think, the best part about the marketing branding experience. It's a fun thing. You never know what you're going to see your thing used for, whether it's an animation, commercial, website. It's just the sky's the limit when it comes to creating that initial brand.
So, in my mind, I hear brand and I'm like, okay, brand, logo. And sometimes it's difficult to separate the two or to understand how they're different, right? Mm-hmm. So when I hear you saying have fun and play around with it, I'm like, okay, are we going to take that Nike swoop and add an arrow at the end? Or are we going to, put a smiley face? When you say play around with it, are you saying play around with it in terms of use of the actual mark, whatever it ends up being?
Okay, so it's two parts to that. I think when you reach a certain level, you can play with your logo. I mean, don't touch your logo. The designer kind of usually has worked very hard to make it something. They'll usually create a brand guide for you. So that'll kind of let you know as a normal person, this is how I should use my logo. This is how I shouldn't use it, at least to start off with. But when you look at brands such as like MTV is known for having that M and that T and that V, but what made them was that they took that logo and played with it. Like pretty much every day on television, it was a different variation of that logo. So I think when you're that established or you create that type of identity for yourself, you can do that. But I think for the small entrepreneur, when I say play around with it, I'm talking about play around with your color scheme, play around with the look and feel. But I say, leave that logo alone, at least to start off with.
Okay. I'm sure Avery was like,
be taking,
don't do it.
Made an ad. No, don't do that, please, no. You pay professionals for that, so you want to use that expertise.
Right. So one of the things that you guys mentioned was the ability to rebrand, right? And so I want to talk a little bit about how do you even know that you should do this, right? So you've gone through all this work, you've got your mission, you've done a little bit of research, like Shannon said, and you're clear about who your target market is and who you're trying to attract. And then for whatever reason, how do you determine that now is the time that you should be rebranding yourself? And what is the process of going through that? And I'll go back to you, Keon.
That's a tough question. And I don't think instinctively it's not like a one size fit all sort of answer. It's not something that just, this happens and you should rebrand. I think
Right.
it's more of a self-evaluation, sort of how you navigate through life as a person. A brand is very much like an individual. Sometimes you get to a point where you see different opportunities. You see that maybe your audience is, they're appealing to different things than when you started out. And so I think when you look at all of those different factors, you can make a decision as to, okay, maybe I should, as a brand, start to think about how to pivot and then how to, become something that's a little different than what you started out as. But I wouldn't like to throw out like a concrete, this is what happens and this is what you should do, because the
Right.
world changes so fast. Companies that might have been doing things last year, we've gone through a pandemic. And so, even using this type of software, last year we might have been sitting in, a nice fancy location
Yeah,
on a
we
panel.
would have been.
So yeah, I think you have to be very careful though, and going back to kind of tying it into the last, changing your logo and stuff like that. I mean, people went ape when Starbucks tweaked it just a little bit. People were mad when Instagram went from the original camera look to like, having the rainbow and stuff infused in it. So I think, you have to be cognizant of your identity and, who your core audience is. And when you pivot, is it still going to be relatable to that audience as well? So it's a lot of sort of decisions and yeah.
Go ahead, Liz.
I just wanted to add one thing to what you've said, is that I think people sort of form some sort of affinity to brands. So when you think of places like McDonald's and stuff, if you went and changed the golden arches to like red or blue, like it just doesn't resonate with people. So I think once you kind of find something that sticks with people and they recognize, and I think you kind of need to like play around with other stuff, like maybe your fonts or colors, and kind of leave that alone, in my own view, just because it just becomes long lasting for your audience. And whether or not they're a user of your brand or product, it just resonates, and people really have an affinity with, different brands like Louis Vuitton. I can think of so many where they're just iconic brands and they don't sway over time.
That's a good point. And I guess the next question is, how involved should people, individuals, your potential client, be in your decision to rebrand? Like, what's their role in making that decision? Avery, would you mind addressing that?
I mean, they should be involved. I'd like to say within the strategic portion of the rebrand. Most of the time my clients come to me looking for a rebrand because something's not working, or they're expanding their business, or they're trying to reach a new target audience, things like that. So we look at it together. What have you been doing that is not working for your brand?
Right.
How can we fix that with a new look and feel? And that applies to the logo design. Do we need to go more minimalist? Need to change the colors. Maybe this yellow is too bright and happy for this serious professional service that you're trying to convey. Maybe blue is a better color. So yeah, I'm involved to a point where it's like, we go over this strategy together and we flesh out, the pros and cons of what the brand has expanded and done. But when it comes to the design, I just, I keep them involved to an extent.
Okay, because in my mind, I'm thinking, like you said, when your clients come to you, it's usually, we went through this too. So we have one design and they did all the missions and colors and the feel and all that. And then we expanded our remit. So in our mind, we're thinking, well, this appealed to this specific demographic, right? They know us for doing this thing. So, and our thought process was, we need to change it so that we can try and go after a larger demographic, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I mean, we could have been on the, thinking correctly in that regard, but I would just think that if the public or our potential clients could help us to decide whether or not there is a need for a rebrand, like you said, like if it's no longer working or something like that. It's like, well, why is it? What do we need to do differently to change it?
Yeah, and you look at you have to look at your audience, and you have to look at your competitors. What are your target audience? What are they drawn to? Like you said, you wanted to reach a wider audience.
Right.
So yeah, there's also, I wanted to mention, like Coca-Cola, for instance. Sometimes if the logo is good, it doesn't need to be changed. So I don't think Coca-Cola changed their logo. It hasn't been changed since the 1900s, I believe. And that's an example of a brand and a logo that's, timeless and is versatile, and it just works. So, you could start off with the brand and at a logo design and not have to change it. So it really depends on so many factors.
And I guess that's why it's so important to do the work before you kind of settle on something. So kind of do your research, know who you're trying to attract. So let me ask you this. When you're talking about, if we're talking about trying to position our brand, right? There's tons of stuff out there. Some we can recall very quickly, others not so much. So what are some of the tools or things that you do to try and identify who you're going to be targeting or who your brand should be attracting? And I'll start with you, Shannon. When you were coming up with your brand, what were some of the things that you looked at to identify how best to communicate to, I guess, your target demographic?
Sure. This is actually a very topical conversation because Shea Naturals is actually going through a rebrand. So
okay.
But I'll address your question now first. So when coming up with the brand and when deciding on the target audience and sort of the identity of the customer, I looked at my competitors. I knew I wanted to have a brand that was vegan and all natural. So I looked at what the top brands in that area were doing, what they looked like, what type of ingredients, and then you come to find certain trends in terms of the ingredients, in terms of the packaging, in terms of the voice. And then from there, I went on to identifying who I wanted to target. So I know I wanted my brand to be priced a certain way. So I know that in terms of who I was targeting people who wouldn't mind paying, $40 for like a body oil compared to another product. Also, when it came to the feel of the product and the branding, I know I wanted it to be luxurious. So I know that I wanted to have, for instance, the gold, which is very important within the packaging. And I also knew sort of where my target audience shopped at. So when it came to the type of stores that I want my product to be in, I made sure that it matched the other products that they sell so that it all fits in.
Okay. I mean, that's a good point. It's like you're doing secret shopping, right? Before you're launching the brand, you're like, wait a minute, what's going on with everybody else? Did you do the same thing, Liz? When you were once you decided like I'm going full force, it's going to be a business. Did you like who else is doing what I'm doing, and should I do anything different to try and create or position myself in the market even better?
Yeah, I think for me at the time that I launched, there wasn't really anyone doing what I focused on, which would have been the luxury picnic. So we kind of were like the first in the market for that. So it sort of allowed us to establish a brand identity from the outset. Mm-hmm. But I think what I looked at more was if I wanted to operate in the luxury market was like, how do other luxury brands operate, whether it's a clothing brand, a hotel brand, events brand. I've really done like a lot of I wouldn't say formal research, but just things like looking at like, how does this luxury hotel, like what are the little details they do to distinguish themselves from maybe a 3-star hotel? So I think that really helped me in terms of things I already had known from my own experience, plus like just even more intentional research of like just all the little things. And I think that's what luxury is, like all the little details that most common brands maybe, for various reasons, whether pricing or audience, kind of overlook.
Okay. All right. Well, it definitely makes sense to do the research, especially looking at where you want to be and going back to what Ken said earlier, which is think big. Like you may not be there yet, but certainly you need to ensure that you're thinking about where you want to be and who you want to work with. So now when we're talking about positioning of the brand, is it important to be considered at the top of the field that you're in, or does that matter? And I don't know who, let me ask you, D'Amico, because you work with all of these people. So let me ask you, when you're thinking about positioning, are you trying to get right in at the top, or is there a gradual process, or what does it look like?
I think it starts at the conversation you guys have been having about trends. Obviously, you're a new business, so you're gonna have to look at the trends. You're gonna have to say, this is what's working. So it's crazy to not actually go with, this is what this company's doing that's very similar to mine. So let me at least not start there. But I think to get to the top of the market, it's then about breaking trends. So you're following it first, and then it's actually finding a trend, following it, and then breaking it, pretty much. I think when you look at some of the best brands in Bermuda and in the world, they kind of had something established for at least the past couple of years since their beginning. Avery brought up Coca-Cola earlier, and Coke, really established himself as this amazing, straightforward soda brand. And then around the 1960s, 50s, they stepped up and started supporting the civil rights movement. And so you think of the fact that, this is a safe company, very much followed by a certain group of people. And then for them to take the step of saying, we're going to kind of U-turn our brand and say, let's do something as bold as to support civil rights at that time period. That's what you call really breaking the trend, because no other soda company is going to, step out and do that. But that's really what you want to do. You want to make a statement. I look at Nike right now. They're doing an amazing job of, supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. And a lot of that is that, they've been a straightforward sports company, and now suddenly they're saying, let's step out and follow a social issue. So maybe it's the social issue thing, but I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it is really about breaking, the traditional trend of this is what's made us. So now let's really find our way to the top of the pile and get everyone talking about us. And I think that's what really puts you at the top. As long as everyone's discussing you, I think of Kian and Brett Booms, part of why they work is because they're constantly creating new trends in our society, and then saying, hey, we're going to completely take a U-turn here and get everyone talking about us about something else. So, you create the trend to break it. And that's really, I think, what creates that top market.
So, Kian, since D'Amico rightly segued into the question, he called you out. Is that is that part of your process? Like, did you say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and then we're going to break it wide open and do something different? So do you think about your brand in that way and consciously make decisions to do that?
So Dejan started the brand, so he would have made that initial decision. But what I will say is, I remember something my dad actually told me when I was a kid, and that was the fastest way to the front of the line is to create your own. Okay. And so, when we think about the word top or number one, in a journey, there's no real finish line, and in our heads, we really don't look at other brands as competitors. We are very intentional about knowing what we want to do, what our mission is, what type of impact we want to have, and fulfilling that to the best of our ability. And so I think as a brand, you have to think of yourself as, just trying to fulfill what it is that you set out to do, and making sure that that resonates with the people that follow you. So for Barmians, we all things Bermudian. We're proud to be Bermudian. We want to highlight things that, people, places, tradition, history, all of those things. Some people say, why don't we do news? You have a big audience. Why don't you, do news? But, that's not what our mission is. Our mission is to highlight things, kind of cherry pick them, and, focus on quality over quantity and stuff like that. So I think for every brand, you have to make that decision. Apple, you know, they
Yeah.
sell computers like everyone else. They have, you know, Intel chips, they're switching all, but a lot of the things are commodities where, you know, you can say that Microsoft and Apple have a lot of the same things, but they made a decision that they want to be of value to people that want to create things. They want to, you know, focus on music and art and stuff like that. So yeah, that whole wanting to be number one and being at the top, I think it's a metric that you can never achieve.
I think it's what you said was really interesting, and it brought to mind authenticity, right? So, you know, I know we talked about, Avery mentioned it, when you're thinking of the mission and what ultimately it is, what you're trying to achieve. I think if you're authentic and your customers or your potential customers see that and can feel that, then it makes it a lot easier for you to kind of cement yourself, or like you said, create your own lane, right? So yeah, I think that's really interesting. Avery, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, sorry, you were talking about
Authenticity and how that can impact your ability to actually create your own lane, so you're at the top in terms of positioning, or you know, you'll rise to the top, not by anything other than the fact that you are just being true and staying true to whatever your mission was, whatever you're trying to do. Like D'Amico mentioned the Coca-Cola and civil rights and stuff. It's like a lot of people think, okay, well, I don't want to do that because I don't want to disenfranchise any of my potential customers, right? Like if I go Black Lives Matter, then the people who don't go Black Lives Matter may stop drinking my product or may stop buying my product. So at what point does all of that not matter? And what matters most is the authentic nature of what it is and what you want your brand to represent. And being able to create your own lane, right? So you don't have to worry about trying to fit in. You don't have to worry about whether or not somebody's going to stop buying your stuff because they can't resonate with whatever your position is, whether it's socially or otherwise.
Yeah. I agree. I think being honest when it comes to your branding and what you stand for is so important. And I think that also relates to your story. So like, you know, people relate to the personality, the brand personality. If there's a distinct story that, you know, they can resonate with or, you know, relate to, or maybe some people want to be like you because of your story. I think that's super important in getting people to bandwagon on your brand and buy into your brand. We at Strategy, we talk a lot about being authentic and how storytelling is super important within the branding and you know, marketing materials. We always say to our clients, you know, anywhere you can reinstate your story, whether it be on social media or, you know, within ads on print ads or, you know, anywhere, just marketing materials in general. Just reinstate your story so people get to know who you are, your brand personality, basically. And I think staying true to that, regardless of what anyone else says, is super important because people latch on to that. They start to like you. So yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, especially now with social media, you can speak to this, Keon, I'm sure, how it impact how you're able to engage people, right? And it's almost like if you come up with something, you can very quickly know whether or not it's going to work because somebody's going to tell you, right? That you're either going to be on Maj's list or something. They'll tell you very quickly whether or not it's working. So in terms of social media and using it to kind of help yourself to kind of position or create and establish your brand identity, how much do you think you should use it? And what are some of the tools and techniques that you've used to kind of cement Bermemes as the, I don't know, the social kind of local Bermudian end all be all? Like if you want to know how it's done in Bermuda, go to Bermemes, right?
Yeah. Social media is a tool. We've always, as humans, wanted to communicate. We've always had great stories to tell. We've always had extraordinary people, and you know, it's being specific about Bermudians. We've, you know, you can go back in history and, you know, pick a decade, you'll find people that are shining and doing great things. So with social media, it's just an extension of tools that we've always, you know, whether it's been radio or TV or, you know, with social media, it's just, it allows obviously a much global, instant, you know, way of communicating in two ways. So, you know, once upon a time, we would tell these stories and, you know, you'd read it, but you didn't know whether or not your audience really resonated with that. You didn't know how much of your audience, you know, liked or loved or was wowed by or did not like a particular piece of content that you put out. And so I think with social media, it allows you to really have a very precise, scary, big brotherish way of analyzing how people are engaging with the content that you are. And with that also comes the responsibility of, you know, being able to reach a lot of people does not just give you a pass to freely say what's, you know, on your mind and not thinking about the consequences and the impact of that. So I think if anything, it causes you to have to be even more responsible and more intentional than you used to, just because it just has so much reach now.
So with that, how important do you think it is for you as the individual or the business owner and your brand or whatever it is to mesh? Like, how important is it for those things to match? Because I'm thinking like you are the one that's going to be responding to whatever the posts are on social media, right? So what voice are you using when you do that, right? Is it Bermeems? Is it Keon? Is it a mix of both? Or are they one and the same?
Pros and cons to that. We try to have a voice, and brand voice is important for any company. You know, you obviously want to have that personality be reflected in your identity in all manners, including how you message. But you also want to be intentional about sort of differentiating. I mean, Dejan and I both get called at different times, "Hey, Bermeems," you know, but we're not, you know, we're content creators. The platform is really for all Bermudians. So Bermeems is all of us, you know, it represents all of us. And we're cognizant of that. So, you know, we want to appear or allow Bermudians to be shown in a light that's positive because the world is watching. But there is, you know, those instances where, you know, you think of Black Panther, or you think of, you know, Fast and Furious, and how those actors that were phenomenal were so connected to those brands, and unfortunately they passed away. So what happens to the brand in that instance? Or what happens to the brand if the CEO of Papa John's starts to wild out, and all of a sudden the brand is perceived as racist? You know, so it's a delicate balance of, you know, being a spokesperson or a figurehead somewhat of a brand and differentiating your personal from actually being the brand. So I don't know, that was a ramble. I don't know if that answered anything.
No, it did. It definitely with regard to the voice and how you communicate. I wanted to ask you, Shannon, because you are just in the midst of undergoing a rebrand, right? And so I guess how, first of all, how did you come to that decision? Was it something that you said, okay, well, we need to elevate ourselves, or your clients are saying, no, we like it this way? How did you decide to do it? And then I would ask you the same question as an entrepreneur. Is your brand kind of synonymous with you as the person and the individual? And how do you communicate that?
Sure. So in terms of the rebrand, there's several reasons why we're actually rebranding. So one of them is, you know, we love transparency, and our customers do as well. And customers, they love to feel like they are involved in your business. They like to feel like you care about them as an individual. So what we do is we do a lot of polls on our Instagram page. We do it on Instagram because we find that's where most of our engaged audience is. You know, some other brands, if they're most of their engaged audience is on Twitter, they'll sort of communicate more there. If it's Facebook, they'll communicate more there. But our biggest audience is on Instagram, so that's how we communicate mostly. And so we did polls to ask sort of what type of product do you want to see next, or what type of concerns or skin concerns do you have, as we're a body care brand. And most of our customers were talking about facial skincare concerns. And so the products that we have currently do not address all of those concerns. So since we're growing, my aim is to develop sort of facial skincare products. So with that, you know, as we're developing the new line, I knew I wanted to sort of position myself more of a facial skincare brand. And as I'm doing that, this leads to the second reason why we're rebranding. You know, as my background as a lawyer, it's really important for me to protect my brand. And that, when I mean protection, I mean legally by way of trademarks. So in Bermuda, I trademarked Ashe Naturals. But most of my customers are based overseas, and I am looking to, I've always looked at our brand as an international brand. We sell, you know, products worldwide. So it was important to me to also trademark in the US. And because of how trademark laws are, and because you have a brand that's maybe one word different or two words different, sometimes you still wouldn't secure it. So that's what happened to us. We actually couldn't get the US trademark. So I had two options. I can, you know, keep Ashe Naturals, but because, you know, it's only been 3 years since we've started, and because I see, you know, the long term and how I want to be a brand that exists for generations, I felt it was best to change the name, especially after doing different legal action. It just was best for me. So what we're doing is, you know, we are rebranding. It's going to be a different name, and then also tying that in with launching the products. And like I said, the products that we're launching are products that our customers have asked for. So that was really important. You know, like I said, customers, they like to feel like they are part of your growth, and that's why transparency is so important. And that's why you'll see brands showing behind the scenes, or you'll show brands saying, you know, they'll do a poll of, you know, which design do you like, or which color do you like for this. And customers actually will be more supportive and more engaged if you incorporate them in your discussions. So that's what we've done.
Okay. So, I mean, you brought up a good point. It's funny, my colleague, in our meeting earlier today, he was like, oh, are you going to talk about trademarks and stuff? I was like, listen, we only have 2 hours, so we're not going to do that, but you brought it up. So I'd like to ask you, Avery, is that a conversation that you have with people who are seeking your services when they're thinking about developing their brand and their logo? You know, we're doing the research, we're finding out who the demographic is, we know what our mission is, but do you ever have that conversation then that maybe they should look at the fact that trademarking and things like that, if they're thinking big and trying to expand at some point? Do you ever have that conversation, and what is that like?
Actually, no, and I'm glad Shannon brought that up, because that shed light on a whole nother world that I haven't really kind of been involved in yet. I'm, you know, I strategize and help my clients sort of position themselves to an extent, but when it comes to trademarking and things like that, I'm not so much involved. But you know, it's good to know that, because there are those issues that people, you know, entrepreneurs who are just starting out have to go through. So
I mean, I think it's a great point, and I most people wouldn't think of that, right? You think, you know, I'm going to do this thing, I like this thing, these are my colors, this is what I want to convey, but you're not thinking that big. Like, once I go international, can somebody potentially, you know, is there someone else already that has my name or that has my trademark or that sort of thing? So that's a great point. And for those that are listening, if you haven't considered, maybe start now, because I'm thinking, Shannon, if you had done that research prior to picking the name, right, understanding that you were going to be expanding into the US, you might have started with a different name, right?
Yeah, well, my situation is sort of unique because
Okay.
I did all that research. And for my case, it was a brand that trademarked a month before I put my application in. So I believe in signs. So I just felt like, okay, this is probably a sign that the decision to maybe rebrand is the right one. So I don't believe, so I just thought that was a sign. But there are ways you can find out if there are other trademarks, and you can do this for free. So in Bermuda, it's pretty easy because Bermuda's so small, so the chance of your brand name or your brand logo being used elsewhere is sort of slim. But in terms of when you want to go to internationally, in the US, there's a free, I think you can just type in trademarks in the US, and the website will come up, and you can actually type your name, and then you can see if there are other names that are similar. Like I said, we did that, there was nothing, and then when we actually went to apply for the trademark, something popped up. So sometimes that happens.
But I think overall the thought behind it is a good practice to have, right? So for those who are still on that road to developing it wouldn't hurt to do the search now, right? Just to make sure, because if you do have goals of expanding, then at least that'll be sorted, dusted, and done. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, D'Amico, is you're getting ready to do. You're going to be doing the 2021 Carifta Games, right? So these are things that have been done before. And so I guess so in my mind, it's a new brand opportunity for each game, right? Depending on who's doing it and who's managing it. So I guess, what is your process around creating something that's unique for Bermuda, but also taking into consideration what has been done previously? What does that process look like for you?
I guess for me with Carifta, it was unique. The games were supposed to be in 2020. They got pushed back to 2021, thanks COVID. But I was lucky in that in 2012, which was the last time Bermuda had the games, funny enough, my dad was actually the one who created the logo and some of the brand identity for those games, which is pretty crazy. So it's kind of like, if anyone I'm going to talk to, I'm just going to talk to him. But I think it's looking at a mix of things. You have to look at, of course, the culture and history of Bermuda. I mean, my initial idea was looking at, something as relatable as the Gumbays, and then, how does that combine with track and field? And I think that's the big thing. I think that any brand has to look at. It's not just, what you think about in terms of one side of things, it's another side. So while I'm thinking about the culture and the Bermuda side, I'm also like, okay, this is a sporting event. So I have to think about track. I have to think, what are sports people going to connect to? So, I mean, that was my starting point for just coming up with like the logo and the initial look, even the color scheme. It was kind of a mix of, okay, I know Bermuda in terms of sport is going blue and pink. So I definitely wanted to incorporate the blue and pink, but I was like, I need something that stands out as well. So then the pink was, okay, let's make it a neon pink and an aqua blue. And I always hunt for one thing that is going to make any brand or identity unique. And so for me, it was incorporating something totally different, which was the purple. And I was like, well, if this game's going to be thought of past 2020, 2021 now, I think you need something that kind of puts a staple on it. And it was basic. It's just color. But to me, just choosing an additive color kind of said, okay, Bermuda is pink and blue right now, but purple is Carifta 2021. And so incorporating that in all our branding, even down to the medal design. I mean, our medals are very heavy on the purple for that reason. It's because, it's that one thing that kind of defines us in terms of these games this year. I mean, we may have it in the future, but I think that's one thing that will separate us. And it shows in all the marketing after that. If you go to our website, our social media, everything, it's vibrant, it's colorful. So it captures the culture, the history. You see the sport, and then that color palette is kind of, I think, the one thing that, while it was a simple decision at the beginning stages of all of that, it's something as small as that can define brands. And I think that's what everyone has to think about when they're starting out, or even in a rebranding process. You have to kind of think, okay, I have my established idea, but what is one final thing that I can kind of put on this that's going to really make my idea or my brand pop? And it could be a color, it could be a logo choice, it could be anything. But I think you have to sit down with your notebook when you're doing your initial marketing plan, and really decide. It's a couple of key things that I'm gonna set aside and say, this is for me. This represents me. This is what I think I'm gonna hold on to past just the initial identity and everything that you start off with.
Okay. And one of the things that comes to mind as you're talking about how you came up with the colors and all of that is Bermuda, right? You think pink sand, you think the pink and blue buses and all of that. What is you guys' opinion? And maybe you can all chime in on this. With new entrepreneurs or new businesses that are starting and based in Bermuda, incorporating literally things that represent Bermuda. So the pink sand, the pink color, the burr in the name, burr means. You know what I mean? So when you're thinking about these things, how important do you think it is to kind of incorporate that type of identity within your brand if it's initiated in Bermuda? I'll start with you, Liz, and then Kian, I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely important, especially in regards to having a sort of brand identity. In terms of our actual logo, it's quite clean and minimalist. So from the brand, you wouldn't exactly think of any country. But in terms of the brand story, there's always a reference to our originating in Bermuda, being inspired by the landscape here, and like just really infusing the local lifestyle in the brand, but in a luxury format, of course.
Okay. All right. Kian?
Global versus local. I mean, so with bar memes, you know, even if we reach 1 billion people, I'm gonna just the sky's the limit, right?
Yeah.
But it is highlighting Bermudians, and so bar memes absolutely fits that. Having the bar in the name, also the logo being pink at times, blue at times. It you know, for Bermudians, we identify those colors, although, you know, surely, I mean, anything sort of pastel also resonates well when you think about Bermuda. But if you're gonna think global, and maybe your business is not specific to Bermuda, obviously that, you know, the inner circle, your family and your friends, the first people that might find out about this business might be locally based. But you have to think long and hard about ultimately who your audience is going to be, where can they be based, what resonates with them, what are their, you know, what are your values and how does that match with that? Even little things like, I think one of the biggest mistakes I made back in the day, you remember Vibes Alliance? If you're old enough, you remember Vibes Alliance.
I remember Vibes Alliance.
And so we, you know, I started out with another DJ, and we said, you know, how can we spell vibes differently? So we said, yeah, VYBEZ. And every single time somebody walked up, they were like, okay, so how do you get to your website? It's VYVI. How do you spell that, right? And so I changed that to vaonline.tv. So that was, and I had to pivot because I was tired of people saying, how do you spell that? It's decisions like that when you create your brand. They might seem small, but you know, this is an exercise of really like, if you spend the most time when you're setting up thinking about these things, it'll be better in the long run. Ataful, I love that, right? I love it. And
me too.
The brand jumped out of nowhere. So it was just like one day, you know, it was just a normal sunny day in Bermuda, and the next day, Ataful, splash, you know, I'm going to this DTA event, and you know, I'm looking at these wonderful picnics and stuff like that. But it is like my name without a U. It's, if you ask me how to spell it, I would have to think, you know, maybe for a second. Now that's not you know, knocking it, because you know, names they have different meanings and stuff like that. But there's just a lot of things to consider in your name, in your colors, in all of that type of stuff. But don't change your name. I love it.
No, and doesn't it mean dinner table?
But I never get asked how to spell it.
That. Yeah, like you, I would have like so many questions in like the first like 6 months of like, how do you pronounce this? Like, is it my name with like initials, like just jumbled together? Is it another language? So when I did come up with the name, like my friend actually like put a few names in Google Translate because I do have connection over to the Netherlands, which is why the name was chosen. So it is a part of our story. But like for the longest while, people were like, how do you pronounce it? And even to this day, some people give me different pronunciations. And I just think it sort of forms part of our brand identity to tell this story of like why we have the name. It means dining table in Dutch, so it's not just a random name from like Amazon or Google Translate just to be funny or different. But it definitely has made part of the story, and I think now as we become more of a household name, then people do know the name and they're like, oh, that's the girl that does that, or they can recognize the logo. But I think it definitely takes time and patience in the beginning. So you definitely have to keep that in mind. If you do want to do something like that, that you have to be prepared to have good messaging, good kind of, marketing in terms of how it's pronounced, why it's like that, so that your brand has some sort of understanding as to why is this the name.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that is so cool. It means dining table in Dutch. So I want to talk a little bit about how you leverage that brand and the other brands to build profitable partnerships, right? Now, you've already done it. So I just want you to talk a little bit about how you did it. So in my introduction, I mentioned some of the top brands, the Food Network, Associated Luxury Hotels International. So how have you been able to, I guess, get in where you fit in?
I guess the first step for us was really creating kind of a local authority base, which I think would have been through the BTA. What we were doing was both split between a local and tourism base. So I said, this is a great idea. Let me, reach out to the BTA, and that kind of flew really, really quickly. And then from there, I think you just continue to work on and leverage previous partnerships for new and bigger ones. So I think people give brands much more, not ratings, but authority in their mind that it's a legitimate brand, that they can trust it when they see reputable partnerships, not just locally, but on an international scale. I think there's something in the consumer mind that like when you've had a certain client or partnership, like these people have confidence to work with this brand, so surely it is what it is. Like people wouldn't just invest their time in that, and I think it's just super, super important. And I definitely think that's helped us to grow so quickly, is working with great brands and also making sure that it's intentional, as Kian said at the beginning. I think a lot of people think just collaboration or partnerships, but they're not really thinking about who we should partner with or why we're partnering with them. I partnered with BTA for the first year because we were also in the tourism brand. I wanted tourists to have this luxury picnic idea. So it was very intentional. And then other brands we worked with were within the luxury space and also within the food space. So yeah, I would suggest for people to put a lot of thought to that, especially because I remember receiving so many collaboration requests in the first few months when it was growing really quickly. And I didn't want to be that mean person that's like, no, sorry, but I can support brands maybe in a personal capacity or give referrals. But if I'm a luxury brand, do I really need to partner with a grassroots football company to do like a proper event? Or maybe can I support them through maybe a sponsorship opportunity? So I think really, reflecting on that is super, super important.
That's a good point, because my next question was going to be like, how do you tell them no, or how do you clearly state your place and where you want to?
I felt really bad in the beginning, especially because Bermuda's small. So like some of these people I know their businesses. They're my friends or people I went to school with, and I didn't want to be the buzzkill that says, oh no, sorry. We're all trying to grow our businesses, but I kind of communicate in the sense that I can't necessarily support you in this way, but I'd be happy to support you in another way. That way it's not exclusive, but it's also remaining true to your brand and the brand growth. And I don't also think you'll get the same kind of credibility if you're now just partnering with everyone where it doesn't look aligned to your brands. If you're a football company, maybe partnering with local sports shops that sell sports retail and those sorts of things, not randomly partnering with, I don't know, the ice cream shop. It has to really make sense.
Right. Avery, can you talk a little bit about that from a expert point of view, like how would you advise your clients to do that? Because I do think, you know, there's a tendency when you are starting out, right? You want to get out there, you want everybody to know who you're doing, who's doing something. Okay, I'll go over there and do that too. I'll sponsor that. When like Liz is saying, you can do that thing, but the end result of having to do something like that might devalue the brand and your position in the market. So how do you advise your clients, or do you advise your clients on some of the things that they should be looking at as they're looking to kind of build their brand identity?
Yeah, I think what Liz said is so true. You know, you need to know whether it feels right for the brand. And I think that goes back to your strategy. You know, what, say you have this brand, what's your vision for that brand? And you know, maybe your target audiences are different. I think always partnering with someone who has the same values as you and the same sort of mindset and the same passion as you is super important. And then, you know, that way you collaborate in a way that it's fitting to both of your audiences. You're not, you know, just doing it just to get exposure. It's a meaningful partnership. And I think those meaningful partnerships are what make money.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with Liz 100%.
Shannon, I'm going to ask you the question too. Oh, look, Kian.
No, go ahead, Shannon, go ahead. I just
No,
want
so
you to
I
move
wanted
on.
to ask you the same thing, because you know you got Vogue here in your bio and all of that, and I know that they have a look and all of that. So how was it that you were able to entice them, I guess, to partner with you? Or I'm not sure how that relationship was started, but just interested to know what you did on your end.
Sure. So like I said, you know, when I started the Ashe, I knew I wanted to compete with other top brands, and I know that it had a certain look. And for me, I am very fearless when it comes to, you know, selling my brand, because I believe in it. So I just reached out. I found out who the marketing person was at Vogue and Marie Claire and other publications, and I reached out to them, and we had that conversation started, and that's how I got in. And then, you know, similar to what Liz was saying, you know, I've also received a lot of requests myself to either be in publications or to collab with other businesses, especially for like pop-ups. I think it's very common in Bermuda to have pop-ups. And for those as well, some of them I said yes to, and a lot of them I declined. And that was mostly because either where the pop-up was or who else I was maybe collaborating with, they might not have had the same brand voice and might not have had the similar values. So like I said, with my brand, it's all natural, it's vegan, and that is very important to us. So I would never sort of collaborate with a brand that's, you know, sells toxic products, for instance. So I think you really have to stay true to your values. Another thing as well that I do is I work a lot with influencers, and those are mostly international influencers. Like that's because that's where most of my, you know, customers were, and I do get lots of requests from influencers as well to work, who want to work with our brand. And for those ones, I also have to sift through and figure out which an influencer would be best for my brand. And to do that, I look at certain things. I look at how their reach is, what their conversion is. So I sort of ask them, you know, tell me how much, you know, your post would convert, or what type of people follow you. You know, for instance, if it's someone who usually posts athletic wear, then I know that their followers are not going to care about crystal infused oils. You know, so we have to look into, you know, who their followers are and who their reach is, what their reach is, in terms of figuring out who to partner with.
Okay. Yeah, jump in.
I'm very much aligned with what everybody else is saying. I do this psychological thing though. When I you know, think about a partnership, my initial answer is always no. And that sounds like I'm being a jerk, but it's not. It's just psychological, because if you tell yourself no at first, then you have to convince yourself why it should be a yes, and that becomes more intentional. So does it fit the brand, because a partnership is essentially, you know, you're joining, you're connecting, you're, you know, empowering, all of those words. And so, you know, whilst some things might appear to be an opportunity, are you empowering, you know, potentially a business that does not think that, you know, women's rights and women, like when you look at their board and stuff like that, you're into, you know, these social sort of, you know, Black Lives Matters and all of these things that, you know, are you empowering partners? Do they align with all of those values? That's so important. And so, yeah, I think that's been a way to sort of check those boxes, in that if you start off with a no, then convince yourself why it should be a yes. So,
I swear you must be related to my husband.
Type of thing. He does the same.
He does the same thing. That's the same thought process, but it makes you do the work, right? Because it's like, if I start no, now I have to convince myself why it should be yes, and then you have the opportunity to kind of ask yourself the questions and make sure it's a right fit. So that makes sense to me. But what I do want to know now is, and that speaks to a little bit about what you were talking about, Shannon. You just cold call. You was like, hey, marketing director at Vogue, I'm gonna need you to, how do you get in, right? Like I would imagine that, let's say Oprah, right? She gives away all of those gifts in her magazine, the top things that she loves. And I'm sure that she must get tons and tons of letters and requests and all of that kind of stuff. So what are some of the things that you can do to get an established brand to partner with you? Because I'm thinking that they're going to be like, well, what's in it for me, right? Why would I do this thing? Why should I give you an opportunity? What did you say, Shannon?
Sure. Like I said, I think it all starts with belief. I think if you really believe and you really see your brand, you know, being or if you're selling a product, if your product is something that celebrity or that top, you know, marketing magazine or something, you know, would like to see, then I think everything else just follows through. So I knew that when I pitched it, that I knew exactly what boxes to tick. I knew what they were looking for. I know what I had that other brands have and don't have. And then, you know, and if their answer is no, I just keep asking or ask someone else. You know, it's always, a door is always going to open. I think you just have to stay consistent. I actually got really lucky with Vogue and Marie Claire. I didn't have any issues. But, you know, there are other publications or other celebrities maybe I've contacted that I never got a response to. And that's okay, because they just weren't meant to be the ones that I'm, you know, dealing with, you know. And sometimes you get surprised. Like, for instance, I got a shout out from Priyanka Chopra, the actress. And I didn't even know she knew about my brand. Next thing you know, I have all these notifications and she had shouted us out. So sometimes you do a lot of the work, and it does pay off. And I think, you know, what we were talking about earlier about, I think the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, I have a Black-owned brand, and, you know, when it comes to my marketing, I do show a lot of, I show that I'm a Black-owned brand. And that is because in terms of the percentage of Black-owned skincare brands to brands, you know, white-owned, it's Black-owned brands definitely lower, and we're definitely not as supported. I think the great thing about the Black Lives Matter movement was to sort of showcase brands, and it's been a wonderful thing for my business. I've seen other businesses grow as well, and you're also finding big stores, so like Credo Beauty, Sephora, they now has as their mission to partner more with Black-owned brands and to have them more in their store. So they came up with recently a program where they've asked for applications for people, well, for Black-owned brands or people of color brands actually to join. So that's an opportunity for a brand to reach out and get their foot in the door that way. So there's always going to be opportunities. You just have to stay alert. You have to understand the trends. You have to understand where to look, who to follow, who to contact, who to get advice from, and you will find it. It's always going to be there.
It sounds like timing it plays a part too, right? So now, like you said, with the Black Lives Movement and all the unrest all over the world, now's a perfect time, you know, for all of those brands owned by people of color who have been overlooked. Not that they're not good enough, they are. It's just that they weren't looking, and now they are. So there's a huge opportunity for people out there. D'Amico, what you want to add something to that conversation?
No, I think Shannon pretty much said it all.
No.
At least from like a business perspective. I know from the creative side of things, I think that's what pretty much gets us ticking and going in the morning is having, these movements that take place. I think the time when you look creatively of then, I think the world went through the most creative change, and I think that affected the marketing world as well, was the 60s and 70s heading in from the civil rights movement into, I mean, when you look at music, entertainment, everything, that pretty much defined the way film and television go now, the way music is now. And I don't think we really have stepped from that dramatically. Of course, technological changes and things have occurred, which has forced us to kind of be different. But I think you look at the world in general, that was probably the biggest jump in history. And I think that's reflective also in brands as well. We're in a period right now of like social unrest, a lot of political issues going on. And as Shannon said, you need to pretty much, as a business owner or anybody looking to expand their market, you have to take effect and really say, not just I'm going to use it to make money, but also, really be attached to it as well. And I think that shows that I think we resonate more with the brands that feel like it's honest and it's true. And I think it's what all of you were discussing earlier. Then we were pretty much talking about how sometimes it's awkward having relationships that don't fit. Don't be a brand that 1 minute is saying, I could care less about race, and then suddenly Black Lives Matter, I'm going to post a black square, because that's a little. It's a, we
I don't
want
want to call no names on here because I think we recording this, but we know that some of them, some large ones, you'd be like, oh, really? You see me now? Okay.
Yeah, I think we want to see change in the world, and I think those people have to change at some point, and it's nice to see. But I think to do it from a business standpoint, it's awkward. In that case, you need a total rebrand. You need to basically try again because it's not working. But if your business has already got those positive values, I see no reason why you shouldn't jump in and say, I'm going to be a part of this movement as well.
Okay.
I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Working at Strategy and having dealt with all the social media accounts and the postings and the content management and things like that, during the Blackout Tuesday, we had to tell a lot of our clients to rethink reasons why they're posting this black square. They came to us immediately that morning and said, oh, everyone's doing this, I need to post immediately. And we're like, why are you posting this? Is there something you can add, maybe support, here's the websites you need to support, here's how you can donate, rather than just saying, Blackout Tuesday. Get some more intention and meaning to it. And most times we advise not for them to post it, but yeah, the client has the say. So, but we did for a lot of our accounts, we did add, websites where they could donate and contribute.
But
yeah,
I mean, go ahead, Liz.
Sorry, Jamila. Yeah, I think that's very important what Avery's mentioned, to distinguish from performative marketing to genuine marketing attempts that has longevity within the brand beyond a day or a month or a few months of, Black Lives Matter movement. I think that's super, super important. And I think us as the consumer will recognize the brands that are super genuine from the ones that are just doing it back in June, who now maybe have just kind of revolted back to their initial kind of messaging. So I think brands, are really, consumers are really smart. So at the end of the day, I think it just shows the trueness or authenticity of the brand.
Yep, and that's just what I was going to say. It goes back to what we said earlier. It's the authenticity. What is your intention? Like, what are you trying to convey? And is it all a part of you as the individual? But what I've seen, I think there's a huge opportunity, like you said, for business owners who are people of color to kind of leverage the fact that some of these major brands who may not have given them a second look are now giving them a second look because the public and their clients are demanding that they do so. And that speaks to, like you said, D'Amico, about rebranding. And if you were not historically in that, realm, or acknowledging that there needs to be some diversity in your messaging and your branding, it's an opportunity for you to rebrand and move in that direction, I think, authentically, right? Because everybody's saying you need to do it, but stay the course, as opposed to saying, okay, we're going to do it this month in June, but then July, you're back to your old tricks. So I think all of the points you made are right on point. And in terms of leveraging the already established brands to kind of elevate your brand and to submit where you want to see yourselves in the future. I heard you guys say cold call them, stalk them. You said that right, stalk. Don't take no for an answer. And then do the research, right? Because there's so many influencers out there, like you said, Shannon, and maybe not everybody is the right one for you, right? So don't just take the fact that they have millions of followers, but they may have millions of followers, but maybe those followers aren't the people that are actually going to buy your product. So it's not going to do you any justice. We are coming near 7 o'clock, and I want to make sure that we take questions, because I'm sure there's tons of questions. So Kelsey, are you listening?
I am here. Can you see me? Hi. So there actually aren't many questions. I think our listeners have been really into the conversation, but we have a couple.
Okay.
So I'll leave that one for the end. But one question is, can you explain a bit more about influencers? So like, what are they and how do they come into play?
Shannon, you mentioned it, so you can start and then you can go around.
Sure. So an influencer, as the word says, it's someone who has an influence, and that means different things. So for us, as we are a skincare brand, we will work with influencers who sort of post a lot of, I guess, skincare or beauty products or routines, such that people who follow them or who listen to them, people that they influence, all have those same interests. So that means that people are interested in skincare, makeup, beauty products. So in terms of influencer marketing, that's one of our key marketing strategies. And that's because, customers, they love to see people using the products. And a lot of times customers will buy your product and they don't post it. So you might have so many sales and no one would even know, because the customers might not post it. They might leave reviews, but they might not post maybe a photo using the product or a video using the product. So that's why influencer marketing it's really important. It can help with building your content. So in terms of photos that you use, and as well as marketing your product. So yeah, to answer your question, an influencer is someone who can assist with your marketing strategy.
Anyone have anything else to add?
I think it's also, in terms of just putting into a Bermuda perspective, it's also reaching out to Bermudians who you think, have either say in the markets you're involved in any way. So whether it be fashion, whether it be sport, whether it's even business, who are some of the politicians? I think communities are really looking towards and using them in your commercials, branding, whatever, your social media, whatever you want to use it for. I think of working actually with Avery. Funny enough, those strategy was working on Digicel campaign, and they thought to use Gennaro Tucker for Digicel for Cup Match, and of course that's a perfect mesh. And I think that's what you shouldn't be scared to do, even as a smaller brand. The minute you get, I think, a face attached to what you're working on, that goes a long way, and it makes people feel a lot more connected to you. So at least from the Bermuda side, I think we would love to be the international brand that can really get those like million follower plus Instagram verified people. But if you can, at least to think Bermuda, you can go smaller and it can work the same way for you, at least starting off.
Anybody else? Kian?
Yeah, Liz, go ahead, Liz.
Oh no, I was just agreeing, like I was in like big agreement, so that was just a nod.
Well, I will use you as an example though. I think fundamentally, when it comes to influencing, people trust people more than they trust you know, once upon a time, and it was just a one-way street when you didn't have social media, a brand had to tell you why they were great, why you should, you know, buy their product or service. But I think people trust people. So if I hear someone say, I went to this wonderful picnic and I really had a good time and the food was great, I will trust that more than the brand actually saying that. And so I think the idea of having people sort of give their take on a brand is, you know, it's you know, it's a thing that we talk about now as a new thing, but I think it's always, when you travel, if someone tells you I went to this country and you know, I ate at this spot or I did this activity, you'll put that on the top of your list, you know, just because that person that you trust said that. And so influencers all have these spheres of people that are connected to them that trust them. And so, you know, that's why as a phenomenon, it's really powerful now in that social media, we have people that are connected to us. So brands are leveraging that.
Yeah.
That sounded like a textbook definition. That was good.
I just thought of one thing also from that comment. I think because in the consumer mindset, brands will tell people what they want them to hear. Like, we do have the best product, we have the best, I don't know, picnics or whatever. So you get more connectivity or trust from like a real person saying, oh, I went there, I spent money and it was worth my time, rather than, you know, the brand saying, yeah, we offer the best coffee or the best, I don't know, hotel rooms. It just doesn't give that same trust factor that I think a real person can give. So I just wanted to piggyback on that comment.
Okay, next question.
Yes.
So this one, I guess, is for Shannon. Where did you go to get your trademark? Did you do it online or in Bermuda?
Okay, yeah. So my background, I'm a corporate lawyer, so trademarks was sort of something that I've done before and I have knowledge of. So in Bermuda, you register with the Registry General's office. If you reach out to them, they can send you over the application form and the documents that you will need. It's a very straightforward process. In Bermuda, it's not very expensive to have done. I can't remember exactly what the cost is, but it's not a lot. It's definitely, you know, worth it. But like I said, it's Registry General is where you would go to make the application, and it takes about 3 months to hear back. And if it's successful or not, it takes about 3 months. And then for the U.S., because like I said, I was trademarking in the U.S. and that's what I'm going to do with the rebrand. I actually, because I'm not U.S. law qualified, I actually reached out to a lawyer in the U.S. And that law firm is actually making the application. And you would expect the application fee to be about $3,000. And they would do everything for you with the U.S. trademark registry.
Great.
And the last question is, the audience member just wants everybody to reiterate what their business is and where they can find you. And then one more question came in, so after that, we'll do that.
Okay. Sure.
Well, since I last spoke, I will just say I have a brand. It's a vegan skincare brand called O'Shea Naturals. You know, we have products that are all natural, including natural derived ingredients, you know, herbs, and our focus is on, you know, turning regular skincare routines into sort of self-care rituals using natural ingredients.
Liz.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Liz. I'm the owner of Atafel, which is a luxury event design, and we are popular for picnics and private parties and stuff, both in Bermuda and overseas.
D'Amico.
I'm a local freelance graphic designer. I work with mostly multiple agencies and companies on island. But I am also down to work with any individual or anyone looking to start up a business. You can see some of my, at least international work on my website, DamicoWatson.com, or you can just email me at DamicoWatson@gmail.com if you have any marketing questions, brand questions, or if you want to work together on anything.
All right. Avery.
graphic designer as well. I work as lead graphic, I'm the only graphic designer really at Strategy, but we collaborate with people like Keon and D'Amico, which is why, you know, I love the scalable size of our company. But yeah, I'm a lead graphic designer there, and in my spare time, I freelance as well. Branding is my specialty, so I love working with, you know, start out companies, established companies if they need a rebrand. That's sort of my passion. And yeah, I have a website as well. It's averygraham.com. Or if you want to work with my agency, it's strata-g.bm is the website.
Awesome.
Yeah, and Avery does a good job. She did some work with me before, and it was really good. Like, I'm super particular, and I told her we'll do a first draft, and then I'll have a look without any direction from you. It's perfect. So she does a really, really good job.
Right.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, you know, I've worked with all of you guys in some way or another, and it's really good to see, you know, it's really makes me happy to see everyone kind of thriving and, you know, being Black Bermudians, creatives, and being able to work together, you know, regardless of our industry is really amazing. So.
Oh, Keon.
I'm gonna piggyback off of that statement. It is a pleasure. I think I've worked with just about all of you in some capacity, and you know, Keon Dickinson, co-owner of Bar Memes, and the platform really, you know, historically, when it comes to being able to have a voice, I know social media gives each of us an individual voice, but as a platform, to be able to highlight Bermudians, and when we say Bermudians and Bermuda, it's all of us, you know, Black, white, male, female, old, young, you know, whatever your orientations are, your beliefs are, your political views, like all of those things is what makes us all just phenomenal people. You know, there's that combination. And so having the ability to have a platform to just highlight that every single day and to engage with people from all of those different backgrounds, it's just, you know, something that, I mean, I have a 9-to-5, but this part of the passion in this project on this platform is just, you know, it's just amazing. And we get to meet, you know, people that have such incredible stories every single day. And so it's a journey that hopefully never has to end.
That's awesome. Oh. Thank you guys for that. Kelsey, is there another question?
Nope, it's very specific to business and trademarking, so I think we'll answer it offline, but I think that's a good place to end with everybody's business info and introductions.
Can I just add one little thing?
Okay.
And I know this is often asked is, you know, how do you, people say I wanna grow my business, right? And often it's like, you know, where's the highway? I think what a lot of us have said today is that it takes a lot of work. You have to be intentional, and you know, definition of success varies. So you have to know what you wanna do with it. You have to know what type of impact you wanna do, and all of those things. And so, you know, having 100,000 followers is nice, but having 10 followers is great as well. If those 10 people are connected to your same vision and your values and stuff like that. So anyone that's listening to this, including ourselves, I mean, that's aspirational in that regardless of where you are in this journey, you could feel like, you know, you're making an impact. So don't feel small ever, you know, because your vision is as big as Steve Jobs and Apple is.
I don't need to say anything else. I was gonna try to wrap up. He did it for me, but I see the pro. This is what he does all the time. So on that note, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. Definitely want to thank the panel. You guys have shared with us a wealth of information, shared your stories, and hopefully have inspired those who are attending to brand and solidify themselves, and to think big. You know, I wrote down, think big, be intentional, you know. break the trends and be creative. These are all the types of things that we heard this evening from you, and that you all have worked together. It's fabulous. I didn't know that until you mentioned it. So I think there's huge opportunity here for those who are on the call and are looking to develop their brand or expand their brand. And hopefully there's an opportunity, if they need to, for them to each follow up with you individually. So if it's okay with you, we will share contact details. But remember, they're going to be asking you those questions, right, to determine whether or not. So don't think just because you email it's going to be a yes, but certainly I just want to thank you guys again as panelists, and then thank the attendees also for joining us.
And shout out to the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone, and stay safe.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Night, everyone.